Hi everyone, Madik Mandau here, software product and strategy leader at some of your favorite companies, most recently focusing on smart cities and fintech. Today, I want to talk to you about the fastest and most cost-effective ways to discover product value and product market fit. Before diving in, I should say that this is certainly not easy to do, and what I'll be describing is likely a fundamentally different way of working than we and many teams in our industry have been working in the past. First, let's start with how software development has been done in the past. Typically, it starts with an idea, oftentimes by a stakeholder of a business unit in your company. There's a business case made or provided, along with an expectation of when a certain feature is to be made available. If it's coming from sales or marketing, it could coincide with a marketing promotion campaign that might be happening simultaneously. But in any case, this is something that is oftentimes dictated. Then there's a phase of requirement collection through a detailed and lengthy discovery process. There is a design phase if designers are available, and if not, it goes straight on to the build, where engineers ask questions from either the product or marketing person. There's a thorough testing phase and a deployment or release phase, and that is the output of the process and it's considered success. And this is again repeated with the next project. Through this process, we may measure either in real time or after the fact things like time to production and maybe cost of production to get a sense of how much we spent. Sometimes this information is then used to justify future headcount as we try to better understand bandwidth needs for future development. But what I want to talk to you about today is that delivery speed isn't nearly enough. What we need to focus on, even as a technology team, are not just our output, but rather our outcomes. This is because a lot of the things we try don't end up having the impact we hoped. We need to both increase the likelihood of what we release to have the desired business impact and do it faster and cheaper. This is a different way of working in that a big goal of this approach is to work to gain the trust of stakeholders. We want to partner with them to ideate and iterate earlier in the process to find better solutions by sharing in and addressing the risks of driving desired business outcomes. Fortunately, there's a great way to do both. This involves spending more time learning and iterating on the initial ideas and product discovery. It may seem counterintuitive to spend precious development time on asking questions and learning, but the reason is simple. Usually what we initially think is the solution ends up being wrong because what we know today is not sufficient to get to the solution that's truly desired and better from the end user's perspective. I like to use a baseball analogy here because when a hitter is really good in baseball, they tend to hit 1 out of 3 balls. So that's called batting 333. Batting 1,000 would be hitting 100% of the balls, and that's just very improbable in baseball. And even more so when you're talking about product solutions. The chance any given idea will work can be substantially lower. This process also comes from the drug discovery industry, where at the outset it's understood that dozens, if not hundreds, of the chemical candidates that are tried will not work out. So they're put through thorough discovery processes outside of the body first, where it's less expensive to test them, and they move on through more expensive and more time-consuming and laborious model systems until they are tested in the human, which is the most difficult and expensive to test for many reasons, as you can imagine. It's important to go outside and seek out answers with regularity, and there are a few reasons for this. Steve Blank, the lean startup pioneer, says, "No facts exist inside the building, only opinions. And increased size and complexity of initiatives don't help." The Standish Group, an international IT research advisory firm, found during a 2013 to 2017 study that large projects succeed at a staggeringly low rate of less than 10%, and small projects have a 5 to 6 greater chance of success at around 50 to 60%. So the larger and more complex the project, the much higher rates of failure are observed. This may check out with your own experiences. In the companies with which I work, I have found great delays in timelines of large and complex initiatives. Another reason the solution is often not what we thought is the end users often don't know what they need until they're using it. They're figuring it out alongside the delivery team, often without the benefit of knowing all that's possible, especially from the technology perspective. Not only that, the market often shifts in a matter of months and big chunks of overly lengthy discovery become out of date. Though rapid continuous product discovery is necessary, it's not easy. Jeff Bezos once said, taking an idea successfully all the way to the market and turning it into a real product that people care about and it really improves people's lives is a lot of hard work. But getting it right means dramatically increasing chances of successful impact in the market. A big part of successful discovery is learning sooner and in smaller chunks of work. This actually makes learning easier because you're not making as many changes where you don't know what worked and what didn't. Many people try to use the minimum viable product to do this, but a common pitfall is making it much too big and taking far too long to do it. Also, the idea of an MVP can be misleading. Henrik Nyberg, an agile thought leader, made the case that people don't want the minimum of something. And what does viable mean anyway? He argued what we need initially is something that gives us the ability to learn from end users well and quickly, like a prototype. We can quickly iterate to something usable and even lovable where users prefer our solution and pay a premium for it. So how do we deliver smaller chunks of value? We do this by understanding the problem well and delivering the quicker and often simpler solution first, preferably sufficiently better than what the end users are currently using. Taking the transportation industry as a hypothetical example, a product team might deliver a bicycle or a skateboard or even a public transportation pass before trying to deliver a motorized vehicle. This lets them deliver value sooner and learn more from the end users instead of trying to deliver the most complicated and lengthy solution, one unusable piece at a time, without delivering any value to the end user until the very end. This is how a lot of companies die. The market shifts under them or they run out of money as their funders run out of patience. Again, an MVP is not easy, and one of the most challenging, though rewarding, hurdles is pushing ourselves to break down the chunk of value we can deliver to the end user into even smaller parts we can deliver even sooner. I found this can be hard for teams at first, but like exercise, it gets easier with effort and time. In product discovery, we want to learn the right takeaways. So we want to be clear on what problem we're solving. But what does it mean to first understand the problem? Often, teams stop at the superficial reason. Sometimes it's because a stakeholder says they need it to do their job, and it kind of ends there. But other times, it's not really understanding the underlying issue. A technique called the 5 whys can be helpful here. Using our transportation example, say someone tells you they need a car, we can use this technique to dig a little deeper. Now, if you do this for an internal business product with, say, a high-ranking stakeholder in the company, you might get a curt response or possibly an email to your supervisor. You may actually have to get this information from multiple sources and piece it together. If you sense this is about to happen, you can ask to speak with someone on their team who works with whatever you're trying to learn day to day, so as not to take up the exec's valuable time. And afterwards, once you have the more complete picture, you can go back to confirm the story. They may even be impressed and more forthcoming as they gain trust in your demonstrated sophistication. So through this discovery, the product team learns more about the users, and knowing their stuff and what technology is currently available, they can deliver a better solution the customer may not have been aware of. This is also why it's important to understand users' real constraints, not just their stated requirements. But oftentimes, teams are solving fairly common and well understood problems. And the even bigger risk facing the product team is something the pioneer in the modern software product discovery approach, a guy by the name of Marty Kagan, highlights emphatically in his writings. The bigger risk is the quality of the solution itself. Knowing the end user's problem is one thing, but delivering a solution good enough for the user to switch and pay is hard. The team best equipped to find that solution is the team actually developing the solution, the one closest to the work. Marty describes this core problem solution team, what he calls the empowered product team, as composed of a lead engineer, UX UI designer, and product manager. I found people can interpret empowered to mean different things, so you may call this team something different in your company, such as a product pod, problem solution team, and the like. Whatever you end up calling this empowered team, the reason to have three is each of the three owns a particular set of risks associated with discovering the right solutions. I also believe this is because collaborating intensely on product solutions this way works well with three, but starts to have diminishing and deleterious effects in a larger group. This group of three collaborates with an intense give and take from idea to prototype to delivery and to measuring impact. If the team does not achieve the desired impact, they must necessarily go back to do so. This empowered product team is accountable to create a solution that is nothing short of better than what the end users had before. Success is measured by things like adoption, recommendation, retention, etc., and not by mere release to production. As Marty describes, each of the three leads takes on a different set of risks when developing the superior solution. The reason more stakeholders from other departments like marketing, sales, support, legal, etc., don't directly collaborate in the empowered product team discovery sessions most of the time is because the product manager meets with them individually to understand their concerns and business risks from a product value and business viability perspective. It's an immense responsibility. Furthermore, the product manager is ultimately responsible for the product's outcomes and impacts as a whole, but can lean on the engineer and designer to do a lot of heavy lifting with their respective roles. The engineer's primary role is to own the technology risks, contributing the ability to deliver technology sufficiently better to deliver a much better solution. The designer's role is to own the usability risk such that the solution is much less painful than not having it. The product manager must therefore provide the necessary context in terms of value to the end user. The business viability constraints learned from other stakeholders is key as well. Learning both the value and viability context and constraints owned by the product manager, the engineer and designer know what a good enough technology is and what design is easy enough compared to what the end users may otherwise have access to. This can mean the product manager bringing the engineering lead along for particularly instructive user interviews to make the point salient. One thing to note here is the empowered product team is not looking to take orders from any customers or stakeholders. Rather, they need to deeply understand the user's problems they are solving so they can come up with even better solutions together. Again, this is an intense give and take among the members of this empowered product team. It's critical trust is shared within this team and perspectives are valued. Google calls this psychological safety, listening to each other without fear of reprisal. Google found in the early 2010s their highest performing teams shared this culture of psychological safety. An important thing to point out is the team is not actually looking for consensus, but they are looking for the best solution considering all the respective risks. If one solution looks as good as the other with what was learned to date, and the difference can be impactful, an experiment is set up to break the tie. This kind of work isn't easy for many reasons, including because it can be challenging in a group to find the right balance between finding the best answer and making sure everyone in the group feels engaged and valued to contribute. A great benefit to learning sooner includes the ability to learn cheaper. Good news is, in software with current discovery techniques, combined with the advent of the cloud, We can do this up to 100 times cheaper. It's quite incredible. It's really expensive to make a product production grade so that it's reliable, performant, and maintainable at the scale needed. Add to that the cost of continued regression testing and maintaining the code to work with new code. Without first putting ideas through their paces, the rates of solution failure in terms of making an impact in the market or for internal customers are quite staggering. Depending on the type of discovery risk, we have many options to choose from. It's important to use the right discovery technique to address the particular risk, starting with the biggest risks up front. Teams can become too dependent on surveys or passive product demos, the latter being less about discovery and more about persuasion. It's also critical to have the product manager lead the user interviews because the product manager is integrating knowledge of the value and viability risks, and without this direct access to target users and actual users, the critical insights may never happen. But product discovery is not a one-time thing or a box to check off. It's a whole mindset and approach to problem solving. First, we need to embrace experimentation. The process of experimentation involves first conceiving of some perceived need. Then we turn that need into a question or a hypothesis in the form of a testable question. We then perform the experiment and collect data and get insights from this data. If these insights support the question or the hypothesis, we build on it and create more hypotheses to perform our experiments. We can combine insights from these experiments to discover deeper insights. If the data don't support the hypothesis, we have to revise this hypothesis and test again. The ideal scientific experiment only tests one variable at a time. However, this is often not practical in product discovery. But in general, it's much easier to test and interpret fewer product changes than lots of them together. A powerful yet simple example of this kind of experiment is AeroTime. AeroTime did a great 2-minute video speaking to the end user pain point of not enough no-meeting blocks of time in the workday. And then they proceeded to demonstrate how they would solve this using a high-resolution prototype that looks like one would imagine the finished product to look. They then allowed interested users to sign up in their waitlist with a first name and email address. They effectively combined prototypes with a landing page to measure demand, which addresses their value risk. The time for this experiment can be on the order of a few days. This is in contrast to weeks or months of what it could actually take to make a production-grade piece of software. If the demand isn't there, that's precious months of wasted effort and mounting opportunity cost. Instead, this money and time could have been used to develop something that was more impactful in the marketplace. A key part of experimenting is measuring results. Generally, what you want to measure is two kinds of things. One, a way to quantify your specific success rate. This can be different for different products and can be something like achieving some target rate of growth or a target number of successful goals achieved by end users. And two, a way to quantify your greatest risk factors. For example, percent of customers getting stuck on a relatively difficult step or rate of customer turnover. It all starts with diving into the data and finding patterns. The discovered patterns are often not something one would expect, so digging into the data to find these kinds of patterns is critical. Once you find a measure is useful to track regularly, you can formalize it in the product as a baseline and monitor for changes. It's important to start this as soon as possible, and where appropriate, continue to increase sophistication. The most successful companies take advantage of advanced data science methods appropriate to their industries and can be major differentiators. Lots of examples in software exist where crowded spaces turned into an industry-dominant player, keeping competition effectively to a distant second. Oftentimes, it's not possible to do a full experiment beginning to end. To be practical and also save time, it's necessary to take representative samples of whatever target group you want to know about. Not every sample is a representative sample, so it's important to be mindful if certain points of view affecting development of your product are over or underrepresented. The difference can be making the wrong assumptions and building the wrong product. It's also important to resist the urge to think of your target users as a homogeneous group. Different people in your target group can have very different needs and won't respond to the same product in the same way. So, it's important to segment the users. If we thought of every user the same way, we might deliver the wrong functionality which serves none of the subgroup's core needs. This often results in a complete product failure, and without the context of knowing the relevant user segments, the product team does not even understand why the product failed. As important as it is to understand the end users through discovery, we aren't aiming for perfect knowledge of their needs, but we are looking to disprove our hypotheses in the cheapest way possible. We don't want to build something for $2 million over 12 months only to find out it won't work where we could have spent $20,000 over a week or two to learn the same thing and move on to testing a better potential solution. We want to bridge the gap between the 10% or worse chance of success for reasons we may never know, to close enough to iterate quickly to success for reasons we know well. This visual is intended to illustrate how confident we can be in the information we learn from end users about what product to build by the method we learn this information. Target segmented users produce much more confidence for about the same cost and time as the mythical average user, but not as much as actual users in the product or using a high-fidelity prototype. But target segmented users give us enough confidence to move forward with a more laborious discovery method. High-fidelity prototypes give us better info than low-fidelity prototypes, but with additional cost and time. As an example, sometimes testing 3 low-fidelity prototypes is enough to make a decision to move to a single high-fidelity prototype. Whereas stakeholder requirements can be super useful and on the money, oftentimes they can be quite wrong initially, as the user is also just learning what can work for them without necessarily knowing what is possible. Surveys could get that information much faster and cheaper, though interviews could do a better job for a little bit more effort, and prototypes much better still for just a little more effort. Although the product itself can be quite expensive and time-consuming, product usage analytics themselves represent a tiny portion of that cost. Not using product analytics is highly inadvisable, given the very low cost and very high value that can be generated from their insights. One of the great benefits of rapid, continuous product discovery is how fast we can move to learn what is the right product to build and what will make end users want to part with their money to use it. Relatively speaking, it's hours or days per experiment, not months. We also need 2 critical capabilities to do this successfully. One is a way to get our questions, prototypes, or products to the right subgroup or representative sample. And 2, measuring and comparing is critical because we need to learn from each experiment or iteration so we know what to change and what to keep for the next one. To recap, what we're trying to get from product discovery is discover a sufficiently better solution by addressing the value, viability, usability, and feasibility of the solution in a way that is orders of magnitude faster and less expensive than the cost of building the production version of the solution. Once we know what that is, the product pod focuses on a different set of risks with product delivery, namely scalability, reliability, performance, and maintainability of the solution. I like to use the following analogy. The empowered product team works together in discovery like a jazz band, and product, design, and engineering riff off each other to find the right sound. In contrast, the empowered product team works together in delivery more like that of an orchestra before the show, still collaborating but working off sheet music, which is typically the high-fidelity prototype, to solve for a different set of risks and dial in the solution for the big show, which is the staging environment in the case of beta testing or production environment in the case of production release to end users in this analogy. Unlike an orchestra in the hall, with software, we can actually play to a subset of users before we let the whole market hear it to gain confidence in areas we just couldn't test well otherwise. The best time to do discovery is ahead of delivery, just long enough to gain enough confidence in the right next solution. Discovery is the time to move quickly, sketch, ask questions, make mistakes, and revise hypotheses. Your first idea may not be any good. Your first delivery may not be something users love, but it should be something you put in front of your target users so that you can reasonably quickly reconcile what's really going on in the real world
and put that knowledge back into the prototypes, confirm with target users, and then into the product. A question that comes up is, why couldn't you have learned that the first time around in a more comprehensive discovery effort like the requirements collection we described at the beginning? Many reasons exist, but here are a couple impactful ones. The way you ask a question affects the answer, and the particular way the product works brings out a particular user behavior. You change the question, you change the answer. You change the product, you change the behavior. Until you put a tangible prototype or product in front of people, they may interpret your intended solution in all kinds of ways. That's why it's important to do rapid continuous product discovery. Not because it gets you to the absolute truth right away, but because it gets you above 50% success much faster and cheaper than any other way. And this keeps you in tune with what's going on in the real world much better than if you try to do it in one shot, where a single wrong turn, especially early on in the long discovery process, compounds negatively farther down the line. What you tend to get once users actually use the product is a painful reconciliation. So in discovery, bias should be towards bold actions and lots of questions. This is not the time to be risk-averse and not try things. It would be much more expensive, time-consuming, and deleterious to do this in delivery, as many of us know. As you can see, rapid continuous product discovery looks like a series of tightly coupled learning and building cycles, where results are measured constantly. The empowered product team collaborates in both discovery and delivery activities of each cycle, but addresses different risks in discovery and delivery. A cycle can be a sprint or more than a sprint, but generally, the shorter, the better. The idea is we turn knowledge into product as soon as the product strategy allows, so that we can reduce time to money or whatever the desired outcome is. This way of working pushes the product team to optimize between speed and confidence in building the right thing, meanwhile delivering increasing chunks of value to go from testable to usable to lovable product. Going with our transportation industry examples, it's no surprise even automobile manufacturers iterate and build on previous work. Interestingly, software cost is even eating into the automobile industry. Electronics account for almost half of a new car's cost, and software is a large part of that. And of course, software takes advantage of a zigzag path to success. Before Instagram was bourbon, and before that was the Scotch prototype. Before YouTube was a dating site, etc. Given all that, a common question on people's minds is, when do I know to keep pushing on an idea, and when do I know to go a different direction? Also, which path do I follow as I learn new things about my target users and discovery? Another way to ask those questions could be, how does rapid continuous product discovery connect to vision and strategy? The accepted wisdom on this is, you want to be stubborn on your vision, but very flexible on the details. The vision is your North Star, and the framework within which you measure and interpret your data. Sometimes you may learn something so compelling that it changes your vision because it represents an opportunity for accelerated growth you can seize, a new North Star, far beyond your existing market. This is typically not a product pod decision, but one made at the level of company leadership. Another question company leadership and marketing stakeholders often ask is, what's on our roadmap? It's tempting to answer that with a feature roadmap. However, this is usually very premature and therefore inadvisable. A big reason is empowered product teams often find sufficiently good solutions in discovery not very long before they deliver them. Also, roadmaps beyond a sprint or two change and are therefore often wrong and unreliable anyway. The farther out the date, the fuzzier the roadmap. Though many industries have compliance deadlines which must be met, typically a good way to approach a roadmap is by the outcomes we seek. Dates are still fuzzy, but we can decide what we are addressing now, next, and maybe sometime in the future. The vision, goals, and outcomes are decided by the product leadership team, but the empowered product team can help inform the specific outcomes that are possible. At that point, the empowered product team takes on the problems outlined in the desired outcomes and, through discovery, iterates on them. Many of the ideas will not pan out. The ideas that do pan out become solution candidates, where the product team defines feature functionality broken down into stories and delivery, comprising the release plan. The goal of this presentation was to connect the dots between rapid, continuous product discovery best practice concepts and how to go about doing product discovery effectively, beginning to end, in the context of product delivery. Of course, product discovery skill sets should complement many other critical product manager skill sets, including product and industry knowledge and other process and individual skill sets. All these skills are needed to effectively perform the wide gamut of week-to-week activities required of an effective product manager, and there are many. This is, admittedly, a lot to take in at once if you were not familiar with the techniques and skills required already. So what's a good place to begin? One of the best places to start in product discovery is with experimenting, which honestly is the fun part anyway. Once you have a better understanding of what success looks like and guidance on product risks, you'll want to set up ways to measure them, segment your user group, and seek patterns and insights. This is a great way to start shortening time and cost to learning and time to money or whatever outcomes your company is looking to achieve through your product. I also encourage you to seek out examples of how other successful products do discovery. Interestingly, this is not always something they're willing to share in detail outside of general approach, as it often represents their product strategy and is treated like a trade secret. One great example available is the product market fit journey of Superhuman's founder and CEO. You can either search it on the First Round Capital site or click the link in the speaker notes of the accompanying slides to this video. I hope this has been helpful, perhaps eye-opening, and maybe even exciting. Thanks everyone. Please hit me up on LinkedIn or Clubhouse to go into more detail on any of these slides, disambiguate, or apply to your particular situation, whether you're on the product team or not. I'm Marek Mandau, Software Product and Strategy Leader, and I look forward to talking with you soon. Take care all.